I'm pretty sure there is a Treehouse of Horror episode where Maggie has eyes in the back of her head.
Books. 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 Books.
Hello and welcome to Didn't Read It, the podcast that is increasingly anxious about the housing market. That look you just gave me. I am your host, Grace Todd, and with me this week is a returning beloved of the pod, Galen.
Hello, it's so nice to be back.
How you doing, baby?
I'm good. I'm chilling.
This has been a week of celebration for you for reasons that we will not disclose because the podcast listeners don't need your business, but you've been having a fun and celebratory sort of week.
I have been. It's been very nice. I've been working for a lot of it. I just got off of work.
Well, that's what happens in the year of our Lord 2025 is you celebrate through the shift.
Yes, and unfortunately, spring menu waits for no man. For no celebration.
That is very true.
I have cocktails to create. Regardless of what else is going on, I've got to put a new menu out. So,
all right, what's the big highlight of the spring 2025 cocktail menu?
I mean, I'm bringing back some returning favorites, but that snap pea gin situation that is so fire is coming back.
Nice.
Partially because it's so good and people still request it, and partially because I'm lazy, and so I'm bringing back previous drinks from previous menus. But I also made a really, really good like coffee rum cardamom situation today that I'm like very excited about.
Yeah.
I don't have a name for it yet, and I still need to tweak some proportions, but it was super delicious. So
do you want to do a nice thing and pay it forward for the listeners and tell them how they can infuse their own snap pea gin if they're so inclined?
yes, if I'm remembering correctly, I would need to go back and look at my notes, but I think that all I did was rough chop 1 cup of snap peas, throw it in a quart deli with a bottle of dry gin. I did Blue Coat just because that's our house gin. And then just stick it in the fridge overnight and strain it.
And it's great. It's botanical. It's springtimey.
It's verdant.
Verdant, yes.
It's very nice. And you wouldn't even necessarily need to do it overnight. If you just left it like sitting on your counter for 2 hours, I'm sure it would be fine. I just throw it in the fridge overnight because that's just how I do it.
And what would be a good little throw together at home cocktail with their freshly infused snap pea gin?
A little bit of that. It's very simple, honestly. That, a little lemon, a little simple. I have a secret little twist that you'll have to come by the stables and try to see the complete version. But really just like basically that as a gimlet, delicious.
All right.
Yes.
So other than being an incredibly talented bartender, you are our official, unofficial vampire correspondent.
Yeah, I am.
But in addition to that, you are also, listeners might not know, kind of a science fiction nerd.
I am a little bit. Ooh, is that what are we doing sci-fi today? Normally I know what we're doing when I come into these recordings, but today is a complete mystery to me.
I have ambushed you entirely.
Yay.
Are you familiar with Richard Matheson?
I don't think so. That name seems vaguely familiar, but I think that's because of the oysters we get at work are Matheson oysters. So my brain was like, you know Matheson. But no, I don't think I know Richard Matheson.
Well, if the name rings a bell, that is probably for good reason, because he wrote, among other things, I Am Legend.
Oh.
Yeah.
Never actually saw that movie, but I do know what it is.
He also wrote What Dreams May Come, the novel that the movie is based on.
Oh.
He wrote several episodes of The Twilight Zone.
Okay.
Including Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, which is the really famous one with the gremlin on the wing.
Yeah. Okay, so What Dreams May Come and I Am Legend. I know both. I've never seen I Am Legend. I've seen What Dreams May Come. It's a trip.
Yeah.
And I did not know that those were both based on books. That's really interesting.
And books by the same guy, which is...
From the little I know about I Am Legend, and then from my vague memories of What Dreams May Come, very different.
So Matheson was... It's interesting, you know, some people call him like a science fiction writer. I think he's better understood as like a fantasist.
Mm-hmm.
he covered a lot of ground
Okay.
literarily. He wrote for Star Trek.
You know how I feel about that.
He wrote an episode of Star Trek, the original, the OG.
Okay. I'm personally like a TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager girly.
Well,
But, you know.
that's what was on the TV when you and I were coming of age.
Yes, yes.
It's not really your fault. Well, fault isn't the right. You know what I mean.
I've seen a lot of the OG, but that was like, I came up like specifically TNG and Deep Space Nine were like what I was into.
It's what hit in your formative years.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
And also Matheson was a source of inspiration for like Stephen King, and like he's very influential. He was very prolific. He died in 2013, but he started writing in the 50s, like the immediate post-World War II.
That's what I was going to say. If he was writing for OG Star Trek, he would have been doing that in like the 60s.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the peak of his career was kind of from like the 50s through the 80s,
Okay.
90s, shall we say,
Yeah.
at the tail. And I mean, I think he was working right up until he died, I think was my understanding of it.
Mhm.
But he, you know, that sort of height of his fame and output would have been a little earlier.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And today, I've brought you a short story of his that I was inspired to dig out in part because I read an interesting article in the New Yorker that mentioned the sort of increasing presence of what they called like the apartment plot. Essentially, we're all very anxious about housing right now.
Yeah.
We are in a place where everyone is very understandably feeling fraught
Yes.
about housing, right? It feels like your two options right now are starving to death at the mercy of a slumlord
Mm-hmm.
or being house poor.
Yeah.
Like, no one can afford where they live, no matter what they live in.
Yeah.
And it's rough.
I was just having a conversation with one of my coworkers like yesterday about this because she is currently looking for a new place to live and was like, why can't I find this? I was like, baby, because it doesn't exist. I'm so sorry.
Oh, honey, my sympathies.
Oh.
Yeah, it's brutal, and it's making people crazy, somewhat understandably.
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of opinions about what would solve the housing crisis, but for it to be solved, someone would have to actually want to solve it,
Yeah.
and nobody seems to want to.
No.
And also, I think Americans particularly have like a really kind of fraught relationship with home and homestead and the
Mhm.
sort of tension between like rugged individualism and the fact that rugged individualism means you can die alone and no one will hear you scream.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I feel like there are a lot of cultures where it's normal to continue living with your parents until you're like married or whatever.
Or for your parents to come live with you.
Or for your, and here it's, I feel like here that's not quite the norm. And it's seen as kind of like a failing if you're in your mid 20s and still living with your parents, which is not the case. And sometimes you have really nice parents. And that's a really good thing to be able to do and like save money and figure out what you're going to do. And we just don't have that as much here, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah, no, Americans very much do not believe in intergenerational cohabitation.
No. And sometimes it's very good to not be in that situation,
Sure.
but not all the time.
Not all. Well, someday, Galen, will have our compound.
Oh, God, it'll be so great. It'll be so good.
We, like every other friend group of millennials, with our compounds.
We have plans.
What's the worst apartment you ever lived in?
I mean, the apartment I was living in when I met you was generally a pretty cool apartment, except for the fact that we had gas heat, which was astronomically expensive.
Oh, yeah.
I think the first month it cost us like $500 to heat the apartment. And we were like, oh, I guess we're just going to freeze this year. That's cool. So I was sleeping in like leggings under sweatpants with like 5 tops and beanies on.
I remember that. That place was cold in the winter.
It was a cute apartment and we had a really nice deck out back, but God, that sucked. And then when I lived in Florida, and the rent was cheap and it was a cute little house, but like The bugs were so big, Grace, like really big. And it was really scary. I one time had to go to the bathroom really bad and I couldn't because there was a wolf spider above the bathroom door and I was too afraid to go in the bathroom.
Galen, I love you so much, but I have to point out that that's a you problem and has nothing to
know.
do with your landlord.
That's a me problem.
And it's very funny that this is what comes to top of mind because I happen to know that while you have been living in Richmond, you did not have a functioning bathroom for literal months because your landlord didn't properly maintain your plumbing.
I forgot about that. That was probably the worst. Actually, that house was hands down the worst.
I cannot believe the wolf spider outranked the solid month that you spent driving to my house every time you needed to shit or shower.
Okay, to be fair, I did just forget about that.
What's wrong with you?
That was pretty bad. That was
it was.
That was a bad situation. There were rodents in that house too.
Yeah. It was really bad. All right. All of that being said, would you like to come on a journey with me through a little story called Shipshape Home?
Yeah.
Which was originally published in the Galaxy Science Fiction magazine in June of 1952. Mm-hmm. That janitor gives me the creeps, Ruth said when she came in that afternoon. I looked up from the typewriter as she put the bags on the table and faced me. I was killing a second draft on a story. He gives you the creeps, I said. Yes, he does, she said. That way he has of slinking around. He's like Peter Lorre or somebody. Peter Lorre, I said. I was still plotting. Babe, she implored. I'm serious. That man is a creep. I snapped out of the creative fog with a blink. What can the poor guy do about his face? It's heredity. Give him a break. So, our narrator.
Yeah.
And his wife, Ruth. Ruth has a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
With this janitor.
I can tell.
In their apartment complex. And she's being very insistent. And our narrator, for his part, and again, this is 1952, which I'm going to have to keep emphasizing because he is so dismissive of Ruth.
Oh, yeah, that's a full 75 years ago.
Yes. Yeah. And he loves Ruth, I think, but he's pretty patronizing, as we're going to see. And so Ruth sort of plops the groceries down and she gets serious with him and she's like, listen. And he says, I could smell it coming. That dead serious tone of hers, which she isn't even aware of anymore, but which comes every time she's about to make one of her revelations to me. And he's sort of making fun of her.
Yeah.
And she's kind of like, this man is going to murder us in our beds.
Yeah, she's like, I have valid concerns. And you are patting me on the head like a child.
Exactly. And he keeps being like, he's just a working stiff, you know, like he stokes the furnace. She's like, we don't have a furnace. And he's like, if we had a furnace, he would stoke it.
Quick question. Is Peter Lorre a reference I should understand? Do you know what that?
Yeah, he was an actor. You'd recognize him. He was in The Maltese Falcon and Casablanca.
Okay.
And The Man Who Knew Too Much.
I'm pulling up a picture of him right now. Oh, okay. Yep.
Very distinctive face, very distinctive voice.
Did not know that was his name, but I do recognize this face.
Yeah. And the janitor reminds Ruth of Peter Lorre, and he's giving her the creeps. And she goes on to say, you know, that man has some design being here. He's no janitor. I wouldn't be surprised if... And he cuts her off and he says, if this apartment house were just a front for a gambling establishment, a hideout for public enemies number 1 through 15, an abortion mill, a counterfeiter's lair, a murderer's rendezvous.
I mean, I would live in any of those places.
If the rent was right, absolutely.
You know?
I'd run the abortion mill.
Yeah.
And she gets fed up with him. She sort of storms off and does the, you'll be sorry. Don't come to me when you get murdered sort of thing. And he reminds her that apparently in the past, she became convinced that their milkman was in the mafia.
Was there a basis for this suspicion?
And he accuses her of reading too many pulp novels. So I think Ruth is the 1952 equivalent of like a little bit of a true crime junkie.
I was just going to say, she sounds like she would have absolutely been a true crime fan.
Ruth has been listening to too much, what's the one?
My Favorite Murder?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ruth has been listening to too much My Favorite Murder, and now she is convinced that the janitor in their building is a serial killer sort of arrangement.
I have listened to that podcast many a time, and I get that.
And so she basically says that she gives up. He's too stupid to be reasoned with, and he just sort of pats her on the head. But that night they have their neighbors over for dinner, and their neighbors are Phil and Marge.
Ooh.
And the four of them start talking about this apartment that they're living in, this apartment building that they're living in, because Ruth is convinced that it's a fluke. They are paying nowhere near enough money.
Wait, Phil and Marge are not paying enough money?
None of them are.
None of them. Okay.
Everyone in the building, they are in these like 5-room furnished apartments with like laundry and dishwashers.
Ooh.
And the rent is like too low.
That was in my lack of plumbing house. I did not have a dishwasher or laundry, but I was like, the rent is great. There's a clawfoot tub. This is a steal.
And Ruth and Marge especially are like, this isn't right. This can't be right. And our narrator is giving all of them a hard time, and Ruth is trying to ignore him. She looks at Marge and Phil at one point and says, "Let us discuss this thing quietly. Let us pretend that the fourth voice we hear is nothing but the wind in the eaves." And Ruth is really pushing this idea that there has to be some ulterior motive for why this place is so cheap. She says, I mean, what if they just want people here for a cover-up? That would explain the rent. You remember the rush on the place when they started renting? I remembered, as well as Phil and Marge. The only reason we'd got our apartment was because we happened to be walking past the place when the janitor first put out the renting sign. We went right in. I remember our amazement, our delight at the rental. We thought it was Christmas. We were the first tenants. The next day was like the Alamo under attack.
Oh, no.
It's a little hard to get an apartment these days.
Does it say where this is located?
I would assume like New York.
Okay.
But it doesn't actually say. So it could be any sufficiently urban environment to have apartment buildings.
Yeah.
That
there is a rush on.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's an American city somewhere.
Okay.
Ruth and Marge are also commiserate about how creepy the janitor is. Marge compares him to Peter Lorre. And Ruth is like, see?
I'm just imagining him like peeking his head around the corners with like...
Yes, exactly. And our narrator, whose name is Rick, by the way. I kept forgetting to introduce him. Rick. He sort of is trying to draw the conversation to a close, and his contribution to all of this is, kids, I said, raising a hand of weary conciliation. If there's something foul going on behind our backs, let's allow it to go on. We aren't being asked to contribute or suffer by it. We are living in a nice spot for nice rent. What are we going to do? Look into it and try to spoil it?
I don't disagree with that sentiment.
And Ruth is like, but what if they have designs on us? And the two men are like, what designs?
And also like, does it, the things you put up with for cheap rent.
And Ruth starts sort of huffily clearing the table and asks Marge, are you married to a blind man too?
Oh my God.
And Marge says, Men are all blind. We must face it. And of course, in proper dude fashion, as soon as Marge and Ruth leave the room, Phil and Rick light cigarettes,
Yeah.
and Phil, and who of course gets taken seriously because he's a man, is like, well, I didn't want to say this in front of the ladies.
I didn't want to validate their feelings,
Because
but
I didn't want to rile them up. But you do have to admit, it is pretty strange to get a furnished apartment for this little money.
oh my God. Bros.
Yeah.
Come on now.
And of course, Rick is like, yeah, I guess it is. So, Rick steps out for the evening for a little stroll and has a chat with Johnson, who is the neighborhood beat cop, who just kind of always seems to be around. It's kind of giving like Mayberry.
Yeah.
Says, Johnson walks around the neighborhood. There are gangs in the neighborhood, he told me. Traffic is heavy, and the kids need watching, especially after 3 in the afternoon. He's a good Joe. Lots of fun. I chat with him every day when I go out for anything. And it's pointed out, as the story progresses, that Johnson is allegedly here for all of this gang activity.
Mm-hmm.
But Rick never sees any evidence of gang activity, or of crime at all, really.
Heard. Okay.
But Rick pauses and starts joking around with Johnson about how his wife is convinced that there's something wrong with their apartment building. And they riff on that for a little while. Johnson says, very like stone-faced, says, it is my unwilling conclusion that within those walls, 6-year-olds are being forced to weave baskets by candlelight.
Not the basket weaving.
And so they, they have a little joke at Ruth's expense. And Rick says he's going to stop letting Ruth read all those science fiction magazines. And Johnson does ask what it is she actually suspects. And Rick is like, oh, nothing. She just thinks the rent's too cheap. But don't tell anybody,
Yeah.
I don't want to lose a good deal.
Mm-hmm.
And a little time passes. Ruth comes in and says, I knew it. She says, I knew this place was a fluke. I knew something was wrong. And he's like, oh, God. Actually, what he says is, yes, dear. I found engines in the basement, she said. What kind of engines, dear? Fire engines? Her lips tightened. Come on now, she said, getting a little burned. I saw the things. She meant it. I've been down there too, hun, I said. How come I never saw any engines? She looked around. I didn't like the way she did it. She looked as if she really thought someone might be lurking at the window, listening. This is under the basement, she said. I looked dubious. And she says, you know what? I'll show you.
Yeah.
Fine. And she drags him out of the apartment, and she explains as she goes that she was going down to do the laundry. And when she got out of the elevator in the basement where the laundry room is, she saw another door, like a door that had not been there previously. And that through that door was the engines.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But they get out of the elevator, and there's no door.
Uh-huh. Okay.
There's just a blank wall. And she's agitated. She's angry.
I would, yeah.
Yeah.
Understandably.
And she's
both agitated and perplexed.
yes.
Yeah.
And she says, she swears a little, and she's like, she basically is like, don't even say it. Like, I know exactly what you're gonna say. And as they're standing there, the janitor appears.
Dun, 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 dun.
Says, did you lose something? The janitor's voice was sort of like Lore's, low and insinuating. Ruth gasped, caught way off guard. I jumped myself. My wife thinks there's I started nervously. I was showing him the right way to hang a picture, Ruth interrupted hastily. That's the way, babe. She turned toward me. You put the nail in at an angle, not straight in. Now do you understand?
We love a woman who can think on her feet.
And she drags him away. And she's like, what are you trying to do? Get us caught? And he is flabbergasted.
Yeah.
It's worth noting that he instinctively betrays his wife in a heartbeat the minute a man asks him a question.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, also, if he thinks nothing is going on, it's just like, oh no, she's just being crazy. She's showing me this imaginary door.
Well, and as she drags him away, it says, look at me, she said quickly. I looked hard. Do you think I'm crazy? She asked. Come on now. Never mind the hesitation. I sighed. I think you're imaginative, I said. You read those... she muttered. She looked disgusted. You're as bad as... You and Galileo, I said. I'll show you those things, she said. We're going down there again tonight when that janitor is asleep. If he's ever asleep. I got worried then. Honey, cut it out, I said. You'll get me going, too. Good, she said. Good. I thought it would take a hurricane. I didn't get it. Was she actually serious? All right, I thought. I'll take it straight. She saw a door that was left open. Accidentally. That was obvious. If there really were huge engines under the apartment house, as she said, then the people who built them darn sure wouldn't want anyone to know about them. East 7th Street, an apartment house, and huge engines underneath it. True?
It wouldn't be beyond the pale for there to be some kind of engine room, but the whole, disappearing door thing, like, especially if you're in a big city.
Yeah.
Like that.
Mm-hmm.
And as we discussed, you said it's like some kind of urban area and they're saying East 7th Street. Like, it's a city. An engine room, again, not unfeasible.
Well.
But, however,
Ruth comes steaming in next and announces, the janitor has 3 eyes. And she's really shaken.
Yeah. Oh, this poor woman.
And he like, holds her close and she's like, I know you don't believe me. And he's like, well. She says, we're going down tonight. This is important now. It's serious. So she's insisting now that they are going to go down to this engine room. She sounded edgy now, a little hysterical. I tell you, there are engines down there. God damn it, there are engines. And she tries to explain about the janitor.
And his 3 eyes.
And she says that she went down to the basement. She was checking something.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, what matters is what happened when I walked past the janitor. He smiled. You know the way he does. Sweet and murderous. I let it go. I didn't argue the point. I still didn't think the janitor was anything but a harmless guy who had the misfortune to be born with a face that was strictly from Charles Addams.
I do know that reference.
So, I said, then what? I walked past him. I felt myself shiver because he looked at me as if he knew something about me I didn't even know. I don't care what you say. That's the feeling I got. And then she shuddered. I felt him looking at me. I'd felt that too when he found us in the basement. I knew what she meant. You just knew the guy was looking at you. All right, I said. I'll buy that. You won't buy this, she said grimly. When I turned around to look, he was walking away from me. I could feel it on the way. I started weakly. His head was turned, but he was looking at me.
Oh, no.
I swallowed. I sat there numbly, patting her hand without even knowing I was doing it. How, hun? There was an eye in the back of his head.
Not ideal.
And it says, I looked at her in, let's face it, fright. A mind on the loose can get awfully confused.
A mind on the loose. Like, who amongst us
And he's like, why haven't we seen it before? And she's like, because there was hair and then the hair covered it up again.
It's just like a little curtain that's like opening in the back of his head. I'm just imagining like, do you remember was it Billy Porter wore that amazing like hat to the Grammys or the Oscars or something where he had that curtain?
The curtain.
They had the curtain that would just open up. Like that's what I'm picturing right now.
Just curtains.
With the janitor's hair.
Yeah. Oh my God. And so she insists that that night, they are going down to the basement and they're going to figure out what the is going on because the janitor has 3 eyes and he smiled at her creepily and she wants this sorted out.
Respect to her because my fraidy cat butt would have just been like, we'd never have to go down there again. I am never getting in that elevator. I'm never going below the ground floor to get out of this house. Not doing it.
I live here forever now.
Yep.
And he basically is like, okay, I will go with you, but you need to rest. Like he's being very like, okay, crazy lady. And he waits for her to fall asleep. And he goes across to Phil and Marge's because, of course, what he needs to do is consult with Phil.
Yeah, obviously.
Another man.
Yep. Good old reliable Phil.
Good old reliable Phil.
Never met hysteria in his life.
Nope. He's like, what do I do? And Phil's like, I don't know. And of course, once again, between the two of them, they're like, is it possible that something is wrong with this building? Is it possible that there is something wrong with this janitor? And Rick tells Phil about Ruth insisting on them going down to the basement. And Phil is like, when you go, I want to come with you. Because Marge told me that the janitor had 3 eyes.
Okay. Bros, come on now. Look, realistically speaking, if either of our respective partners was like, hey, this dude had 3 eyes, you would come to me and be like, I'm a little worried. I am just a little bit worried about what's going on. But if both of them independently were like, hey, you and I both would be like, oh, fuck. What is happening? And why haven't they discussed this before?
So, Ruth wakes him up at a little before 4 a.m. She says, it's time.
Ugh.
She's already dressed. She like hands him a cup of coffee. He's like trying to get himself together. It says, I heard her in the kitchen making some coffee while I put on my clothes. There was no noise. I mean, it didn't sound as if her hands were shaking. She spoke lucidly. But when I stared into the bathroom mirror, I saw a worried husband. I splashed cold water in my face and combed my hair. As she handed me the cup of coffee, I stood there, nervous before my own wife. And she's like, let's get to it.
It's the witching hour. We're doing this.
It is time. And he tries to like get Phil and Marge, but by the time he like knocks on their door, but as he's waiting for them, Ruth just goes for it. She just gets in the elevator.
It's just like, oh shit,
So
I
he,
can't
like-
leave her alone.
He like tears off after her and Phil's like, we're coming. And he's like, I can't wait. I have to go. And he gets down to the basement and Ruth is standing in front of a doorway that wasn't there before in the wall. And the first thing she says to him is, now stop acting as if I was insane.
Good for her. Out of curiosity, do they discuss like a time frame or like time of day in which she originally saw the door?
No.
Is it just okay? I was curious if there was like, oh, I was down there late at night kind of thing, or if it's just
But she's
coming and going as it pleases.
Ruth has clearly concluded that if the door is going to be open all willy-nilly, it will be at weird hours of the morning.
Yeah, that's fair.
And to Rick's credit, it says, I gaped and felt a hand pressing against my cheek. It was my own. She was right. There were stairs, and it was lighted down there. I heard sounds of metallic clickings and strange buzzings. I took her hand. I'm sorry, I said. I'm sorry. And Ruth very magnanimously says, it's all right. Never mind that now. but there's something fluky about all this. And he's like, yeah, I think there is. And she's like, we got to go in there. And he's like, I don't think we need to go in there. And she's like, we have to know. And they start down the stairs. And it says, then it came to me. If she was right about the doorway and the walls and the engines, she must be right about the janitor. I felt a little detached from reality. East 7th Street, I told myself. An apartment house on East 7th Street. It's all real. I couldn't quite convince myself. And they get to the bottom of the stairs. And Ruth is right. It's a giant engine room.
I am, for some reason, starting to have some tickles of familiarity. And I don't know.
Thoroughly possible.
I just remembered what the title of this was. Keep going. I'm sorry. But there was something that just like ticked in my brain that was like, do I know something about where this is going?
So, fantastic engines. And as I looked at them, it came to me what kind of engines they were. I'd read about science too, the nonfiction kind. They go kind of jogging out, like they have a look around, and then it's time to bolt.
Mm-hmm.
And they go kind of jogging down the hallway, and there's the janitor.
Yeah, of course, obviously.
They duck behind a column, and it says, he passed us. He was holding a flashlight, but he didn't play the beam around. He just moved straight for the open door. And then it happened. As he came into the patch of light from the open doorway, he stopped. His head was turned away. The guy was facing the stairway, but he was looking at us. It knocked out what little breath I had left. I just stood there and stared at that eye in the back of his head. And although there wasn't any face around it, that damned eye had a smile going with it. A nasty, self-certain, and frightening smile. He saw us, and he was amused, and wasn't going to do anything about it. So they bail. They run out of the basement.
Yeah, understandably.
Phil and Marge, the four of them, they all get together in Rick and Ruth's apartment.
Phil and Marge never make it down, but they kind of reconvene at the top.
Yeah, they reconvene at the top. Everyone goes into Ruth and Rick's apartment, and they all sit around to decide what to do.
To pour a stiff drink is what you do first.
Yeah. And Rick wants to just grab everything and bolt.
That seems like the logical conclusion here.
But the other three don't seem to be in a rush. They're agreed that this is a problem, but they don't seem to feel that it's like a in the next 10 minutes kind of a situation.
That is just how good the rent is here.
And Ruth, in true Ruth fashion, Ruth is like way ahead of everybody. She's like, she's spinning theories. Ruth has ideas.
Yeah.
So the first thing she says is, listen, they're probably extraterrestrials. And Marge, bless her, it slowly becomes apparent sort of over the course of the scene that Marge does not have Ruth's imagination, and Marge just keeps getting increasingly irritated as Ruth keeps making suggestions. Ruth is like, they're aliens. Maybe they figured out how to make matter invisible. And Marge is like, what the f*** are you talking about? Just gets like more and more annoyed. And so Ruth has concluded immediately that it is aliens and that the apartment building is a rocket ship.
I mean, I don't blame her for coming to these conclusions.
And she's like, what better way of filling a rocket ship full of people than making it look like an apartment building and making the rent really cheap so people come running in, and then you just take off with all the people in their apartments inside.
This very much sounds like a 4 a.m. coke-fueled rant. Of like, no, I swear to God, it's aliens. We're in a rocket ship. What else could it possibly be? Like, this is what this is giving right now.
Yes. And of course, like, Phil is like, but it doesn't look like a ship. And she's like, they're aliens. Maybe they've figured out how to make things invisible. And Marge is like, losing her mind. Marge is like, shut up. And finally, and Ruth is like, but isn't it possible?
Yes, baby, it is possible.
And says, I sighed. It's possible. Just possible. We were quiet. Then Ruth said, "Listen." "No," I cut in. "You listen. I think maybe we're going overboard on this thing. But there are engines in the basement, and the janitor does have 3 eyes. On the basis of that, I think we have reason enough to clear out now." And everyone agrees, right?
Yeah, that's pretty logical.
And Ruth is like, "Well, we have to tell everyone else who lives here.
Also pretty logical.
We cannot just leave all of these people in this building."
Both logical and thoughtful.
And they decide they're going to do it. And the door's locked.
Like the door to their apartment, like they can't get out.
It is locked from the outside.
Oh, that's not ideal.
No. Yeah.
Although, to be fair, if they had started at, whatever it is now, 5 a.m, knocking on everyone's doors and being like, "We're in an alien spaceship and you have to leave now." Maybe might not have had the reception that they were hoping.
Well, they've been locked in their apartment and they all look at each other. They all 4 of them stand there staring at each other for a moment. And then Ruth says, "It's true. Oh my God, it's all true." Then the place started to vibrate, as if we were being hit by an earthquake. Dishes started to rattle and fall off the shelves. We heard a chair crash onto its side in the kitchen. And Ruth screams, "The engines! They're starting the engines!" And Rick grabs a chair and throws it through a window so that they can get out onto the fire escape.
Yep.
Impelled by panic and dread, Marge and Phil came running over the shaking floor. I almost shoved them out through the gaping window hole. Marge tore her skirt. Ruth cut her fingers. I went last, dragging a glass dagger through my leg. I didn't even feel it, I was so keyed up. I kept pushing them, hurrying down the fire escape steps. Marge caught a slipper heel in between 2 gratings and it snapped off. She limped, half fell down the orange-painted metal steps, her face white and twisted with fear. Ruth, in her loafers, clattered down behind Phil. I came last, shepherding them frantically. We saw other people at their windows. We heard windows breaking, above and below. We saw an older couple crawl hurriedly through their window and start down. They held us up. "Look out, will you?" Marge shouted at them in a fury. And they get to the bottom of the fire escape, which is, there's the drop-down ladder.
Yeah.
The old couple barely make it down, but they do. Phil gets down. Marge gets down. Of course, some dude comes running up as Ruth is trying to get down, and he pushes Ruth out of the way, and he gets down first. And it's, Rick gets to defend her honor a little bit,
It's Billy Zane going to the lifeboats in Titanic.
Yeah, Billy Zane comes flying down the ladder and almost pushes Ruth off the fire escape. So she drops off the fire escape, and he catches her and says, "We regained our balance and started up the alley. I could hardly breathe. I had a stitch in my side. As we dashed into the street, we saw Johnson moving through the ranks of scattered people, trying to herd them together. 'Here now,' he was calling."
Just checking. Johnson is the janitor.
Johnson's the cop.
The cop. Right. Yes, he's the beat cop. Okay.
Yeah. "Here now," he was calling. "Take it easy." We ran up to him. "Johnson," I said. "The ship, it's..." "Ship?" He looked incredulous. "The house, it's a rocket ship." The ground shook wildly. Johnson turned away to grab someone running past. My breath caught, and Ruth gasped, throwing her hands to her cheeks. Johnson was still looking at us, with that third eye, the one that had a smile in it. "No," Ruth said shakily. "No." And then the sky, which was growing light, grew dark. My head snapped around. Women were screaming their lungs out in terror. I looked in all directions. Solid walls were blotting out the sky. "Oh my God," Ruth said. "We can't get out. It's the whole block." Then the rockets started. The end.
Okay, so that little tickle of familiar. I don't know if I have seen if there has been similar Twilight Zone episodes or if there was pop culture iterations, references of this, but like there is some deep sense of familiarity there, and I don't know where it's coming from.
It's also definitely got like hardcore Twilight Zone DNA.
It is. I mean, and since you said that he has written Twilight Zone episodes, like that is straight up a Twilight Zone episode. And I
Yes.
was like vividly picturing a lot of those scenes happening.
It's the whole block.
That was delightful.
So what do you think?
I thoroughly enjoyed that. I was watching it happen in black and white as you were.
Yeah, very, very cinematic, very much a Twilight Zone episode.
And I did not at all once picture Marge as Marge Simpson throughout that whole thing.
This would be a great Treehouse of Horror.
Straight up, honestly, that is like very Treehouse of Horror vibes. But a lot of Treehouse of Horror stuff is like
Riffing on
it is like Twilight Zone episodes, but yeah.
And so one of the reasons it jumps out to me like right at this moment is because I think a big part of this story's DNA is, especially so you think about like the story came out in 1952.
Right.
So we'll say he was probably writing it in like 1951,
Mhm.
right? So you're, 5-6 years post World War II. You are in the middle of the Korean War,
Oh, yep.
which I believe by 51 was like not going terribly well. You are also in the middle of like the countrywide tensions over the sort of like GI Bill and the birth of the suburbs. And at the same time, like redlining, and we're destroying black neighborhoods to build highways. And
Yeah. Well, and amidst all of that, this is still a generation that dealt with the Great Depression.
yes,
You're only, 20 years out from that. People, like, they're probably our age, basically. And so they would have been coming up during that. So,
And so there's a lot of anxiety in, I think, especially like kind of like suburban white people, or
Yeah.
not suburban, but not yet suburban.
yeah.
The white people who would become suburban white people,
Mm-hmm.
about really wanting to not think too deeply about what is underpinning this post-war era of rah-rah success, number go up forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm curious, like, I'm assuming they are like late 20s, maybe 30s. I don't know. It's hard to, like, there's really no context clues on that, but like, I lost my thread. Never mind on that. But
It's that thread of like, let's just not think too much about it.
yeah.
Like this whole little biome has been set up just for you. Here you go.
Yeah.
Like the whole world is here to make you feel comfortable and safe. Don't think about it.
Yeah. It's like, oh, look at this wonderful cheap rent. Let's not like dwell on that too much. And oh, it's just this lovely little place for us to live.
Ignore the women who are telling you that there might be a problem here.
Yeah.
Ignore the cop who keeps telling you about gang warfare that never seems to materialize in your immediate vicinity.
I'm so curious what the like the gang warfare specifically. I was waiting for that to come back in some particular way. I guess it was just an excuse for him to be on that block patrolling.
Yes, and I think this is also peak Red Scare, right? So it's a lot of be afraid, be very afraid. Something bad is happening somewhere.
The commies are coming for you.
And there need to be cops everywhere all the time to protect you from the things.
Yeah. Yep.
And it also, I checked because I was curious because, you think about this, Ruth in the story, the character of Ruth is kind of consistently like going out on a limb to try and prove something is wrong to a man who does not want to hear it. And
Yeah.
I checked, and 1949 was the absolute peak of lobotomies in the United States.
That's cool. That's really great.
And so, like, Ruth is really going out on a limb here,
Yeah, I mean,
making
that's
her
like,
husband think that she's mentally ill in an effort to get him to understand that, like, They are in danger.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of today, he's extremely like patronizing and everything, but I suppose at that point in time, he's pretty understanding and chill about everything, considering the context of that.
Is he though?
I mean, no, but like the bar is in hell, but like the fact that he even apologizes for like questioning her and being like, oh my God, you were so right. I'm sorry that I like discounted what you were saying.
Yeah. I mean, Matheson, and there are other stories of his that are really, really clumsy around race and gender, but it seems very clear that his heart was in the right place.
Yeah.
He was trying. He meant well.
You know.
He was on the right side of history. He fumbled the execution a little bit sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know, especially right now in this kind of era of like consumption or refusal to consume being the activism that is like most accessible to us.
Yeah.
All of the things that this story kind of invokes in terms of like the don't pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Just go into the ship. It's fine. A lot of those things are much worse. Some of those things are better a bit, you know?
Yeah.
But some of those things are much, much worse.
Very much so.
And I think right now a lot of people are trying to decide how much energy they have for looking at all the fucked up shit behind the curtain.
I mean, it's hard. That is a hard thing to process. I feel like you and I have had this conversation before. And like, how much news and media can you consume before you start to actually want to just go dig a hole for yourself and just go not come out of it?
Well, and what does it take to get you off the ship? And can you get off the ship?
Yeah.
The conclusion that the story draws, right, is that the ship is too big. By the time you realize you're on it, you're not getting off again.
Yeah, that is like sadly prescient for this day and age.
You know? So yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
It did leave me with a lot of questions, but I think that's a good thing. I mean, I liked the way it ended. The ship being too big is both upsetting and very real.
Yeah. Maybe we're trapped on the ship. Maybe the goal now is to make the ship less bad.
Just make the ship just a little bit more comfortable and more tenable.
Organize a tenants union on the ship.
Yeah. Yeah.
And attempt some kind of organized strike against your new alien overlords.
I mean, it does kind of feel like that's what's going on right now. The new alien overlords. Well, not new, but
Ruth is going to be a real firecracker when it comes time to organize the tenants union.
Ruth and her sensible loafers.
Yeah.
That little detail was just like, I so appreciate that she was like, no, I need my good, sensible walking around shoes for this.
Good for you, Ruth.
That's how you know she's not truly crazy. She's like, no, we need practical shoes for this endeavor.
Ruth is 100% my hero in this scenario.
Oh, she was great.
Everyone be kind to a Ruth. Go find the person in your life who's been yelling about things since well before you wanted to take them seriously. And apologize.
She knew shit was about to hit the fan and she was not going to let it go by the wayside.
She knew things were wrong. Bless.
Yep. And Marge just wanted to push it all under the rug.
Marge just wanted to be left alone.
Which, like, you know, I can also relate to that.
That is real Marge Simpson vibes.
Yeah.
Like,
she's like, you're all being crazy. I'm just trying to get through day to day. Please just leave me alone.
Ruth is yelling about aliens and Marge is like, what are you talking? The whole thing really does give Simpsons vibes where Lisa is Ruth.
Yeah.
Phil and Marge are Homer and Marge.
Yeah. And Rick is a little Bart.
Yeah?
Yeah. Does that make Lisa the janitor?
No, Lisa is Ruth.
Oh, sorry, not Lisa. Maggie.
Yes. Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm pretty sure there is a Treehouse of Horror episode where Maggie has eyes in the back of her head.
This is ringing a bell.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to investigate this after we're done here. That might be what I'm watching tonight.
Well, Any final thoughts?
Mhm. Be wary of the spaceships you may be living on. Keep an eye
Yeah.
out for sneaky engine rooms. They're all around us.
Yes, everything is engine rooms and secret filters.
Don't trust the beat cop.
A cab. Don't trust any cops.
No, just
And don't talk to them either.
Don't say a word.
Never speak to cops no matter how many eyes they have.
Yeah.
Those are
Yeah.
good. Those are good morals. Thank
Yeah.
you, Galen.
Yep. You're very welcome.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you.
I'm so glad you could be with me here today.
This was lovely. Love a little, well, I was going to say impromptu, but we've had this planned for like 2 weeks now. So
Just a little science fiction, little adventure, and thank all of you for being here with us. Just a reminder that if you would like to help me keep making this show, you can go to our website, didntreaditpod.com, and you can buy merch. It's not hugely expensive. Every t-shirt or tote bag or pint glass, we have pint glasses.
they're
with-
really cute.
with the really saucy pinup girl that Jess drew for us. You can drink a beverage of your choice while you listen to the show and then help me continue making the show.
Yeah.
So,
Go buy one of everything.
yeah,
Buy them all.
for your consideration. Also, I happen to know that my birthday and Galen's birthday both have occurred sometime in the last 6 months. And so, as a birthday gift for us, belatedly or early, you don't know which, go buy something.
Happy birthday to us.
Yeah. And as always, if you can, this week, this month, this pay period, consider supporting a living author, because they could really, really use the love. Bye.
Goodbye.
Didn't Read It was created, written, researched, and recorded by me, Grace Todd. Maddie Wood is our co-producer and social media maven. Our theme song is Books 2.0, written, performed, and recorded by William Albritton. Our logo was designed and illustrated by the incredibly talented Jess Versus. Special thanks to Black Iris Social Club in Richmond, Virginia. Reach out to us with questions, concerns, or academic scrutiny at didntreaditpod@gmail.com.